Families of European origin looked different from Native American families, and family forms varied between and among different colonies. The theocratic communities created by early Puritans deeply influenced the shape of families in New England. There, religious dogma insisted that women lacked reason and, therefore, a direct line to God or to God's voice. The religious community demanded obedience to husbands, fathers, or other male relatives. That meant that women had very little voice and no authority. The male head of household could demand obedience from his subordinates, including his wife, his children, his servants, his apprentices, and anybody else who worked with him and lived under the supervision of the household. Indeed, a household that could not appropriately control its members was subject to ridicule and often to community surveillance. The result was a kind of internal spy system where neighbor reported on neighbor and gossip served to control the behavior of individuals. Since a productive and prosperous household reflected well on its head, a good wife might, along with her husband, demonstrate her potential salvation. Idleness suggested the absence of God's favor. Work for the Puritan housewife was simply part of God's order. Its profitable consequences redounded to the credit of the male household head, not to her. In the middle colonies, farmers' wives, and remember that most of the population was still agrarian, worked beside their husbands, raising and harvesting grain for food and flax for making linen. Families tended to live in individual units where women took charge of the dairy, milking cows, making butter and cheese, and growing all of the family's vegetables. In addition to cooking and preserving food, they spun and wove fabric and manufactured household products like shirts and sheets, candles and soaps. What they could not use in their own households, they traded with neighbors. Landless, unmarried women were in rough shape. Without male support of their own, they generally made their lives within the households of others, perhaps with a sister or brother. Poor women, landless widows, especially if they had children, could only be pitied. Dependent on their parishes for support, they were sent out to work as servants, or they were housed in almshouses where they were set to tasks like spinning and sewing in order to pay for their own keep. Their children, if they had any, tended to be removed after infancy and apprenticed out or hired out as servants. The almshouse was a woman's space. In colonial Pennsylvania, 2/3 of the residents of almshouses were women. Yet for some women, custom provided opportunity. New York's Dutch women might work outside the household as traders and as merchants. These women, generally from what we now call the Netherlands or the Low Countries, had historically been entrepreneurs in their own communities, though not generally in larger geographical areas. In the European context, they had brought income to their families and prosperity to their communities. When they migrated to the Americas, however, they discovered that their trading power was constrained by sparse populations and limited communications. Although we have some good examples of women who made profits through their trading abilities, for the most part, women in the middle colonies could not reproduce the kinds of contacts they had had in their more urbanized homelands. Instead, they quickly adopted what we would now call traditional family roles. That is, roles in which they were subservient economically to their partners. In the Quaker communities in Pennsylvania, women exercised religious leadership, which enabled them to influence the faith of their communities. In that respect, the role of Quaker women reflected that of Native American women, but married women rarely played economic roles outside their households. In Quaker families, economic resources belonged to the husband, and even inheritance did not provide married women with independence.